Hi. In this video, I will be reviewing this paper that was published very recently in a very prestigious journal, Nature. The paper is about AI model collapse when you train the model recursively on generated data. At the time of making of this video, this paper has been only published 2 weeks ago. So it's a very interesting paper. So along with looking at this Nature paper, we'll also be looking at one more paper which was published roughly 1 year ago on Archive about self-consuming generative models and how it goes mad. And I'll show you what this term mad specifically means. So before going into the idea presented in this paper, let's try to understand how generative AI models like large language models or other image generation models, how they are trained. All of them are, or most of them are trained on internet data, right? So there is vast corpus of internet data and that is used for creating the Gen AI training data. So whatever data is there on the internet, a subset of that is used for training large language models. But the real question is, what if this internet data itself consists of AI generated data? So we are using ChatGPT to write articles. Let's say news channels or news bulletins, they are posting articles written using ChatGPT. And imagine this continues for next 10, 20 years. What fraction of the internet data would be AI generated? What if it's 80% AI generated? Then basically the future AI models are training on AI generated training data, which was created by its parent generations, right? The future generations of AI are using the data produced by the previous generations. This can cause certain issues. So we'll see what this actually means. So you must have seen this whisper game, right? Whisper game is like, I'll say something in someone's ears, and then they'll hear what I'm saying and they'll pass it on to the next person. That person will pass it on to the next person. And this can continue for 10, 15 people. And by the time this thing reaches the last person, they'll be hearing something completely different from what I started with. So the original data, which is something that I say, may get completely altered when it gets passed on from one person to the next person to the next person. And by the time it reaches the last person, it'll be something completely meaningless. So the way in which AI generates data and then AI training on its own data is very interesting, and it to some extent it resembles that of this whisper game. There is one more interesting point to be thought. So if you are training AI models to generate images of people, most of the photos of people available on internet are probably photos of people smiling, because if they are in front of a camera, they are maybe smiling, they are in a vacation, on a vacation, or they are doing something happy. So they are probably smiling a lot in these photos that are available on internet that are taken from people. And in normal life, probably we won't be smiling that much. But what would AI learn from this? AI might learn that people actually smile a lot. So when AI is generating image data set or image data of people, maybe those image data will have more number of smiling images than non-smiling images. So what if it so happens that the internet gets polluted with these fake AI generated data of humans who are smiling a lot, and then after a lot of iterations of this happening, AI can no longer create an image of a crying child? What if that happens? So this is a fascinating concept to think about. And it's also like on a tangent related to this AI model collapse. So if you think of another analogy, which is also equally interesting, is imagine you are studying, and for studying you are copying from your friend's notes. So your friend is taking notes from the teacher. So your friend is listening to the teacher and he or she is taking down some notes, and you are copying their notes for your own purposes, and someone else is copying your notes, and the 40th student in the class is copying the 39th student's note. So the original version of the knowledge was given by the teacher to the first student, but by the time it gets copied multiple times and reaches the 40th student, maybe there are so many mistakes, right? Maybe the knowledge that is gained by the 40th student is will contain the cumulative mistakes of all these students who copied from one person and then the next person and then the next person, like that. So AI generated data and generative AI being trained on this data is in exactly that way. So let's have a look at this idea of AI model collapse mentioned in the Nature paper. So what they propose is, currently we have GPT-2, GPT-3, 3.5, 4, etc. So what if we have the nth version of GPT or any other LLM? How would it behave? So they have this figure, which I have snipped into this board, where the initial data is the real human generated data. It is used for building the 0th version of the model, right? So now this model is capable of creating new data. So now the sample data used for training the first version of the model will contain some fake data. Fake data meaning some data that is generated by the generative AI model. And imagine you go on to build the nth version of the model. So in this paper, they assume two situations. One in which no data from the original training data is part of the training data for the next model. So 100% of the data for the model 1 is fake, meaning it's synthetic. That is one situation. In another situation, the paper also assumes that 10% of the data is from the original training data of the past generation, and it gets passed on. Remaining 90% of the data is synthetic data created by the model. And what will happen if this proceeds for n number of generations? What will happen to the model's performance? Will the output be even making sense? That's something that we look at in this paper. So an interesting application of this, which you can very quickly relate with, is training generative AI models on image generation. So this paper, which was published, I think in last year, 2023, it's titled Self-Consuming Generative Models Go Mad. So what they propose is that if a Gen AI image generation model was trained on its own generated images, so let's say the generative AI model is able to create human faces like this. So they look like actual people, right? But then this is generation 1, generation 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. You can see that as the generation progresses, some artifacts or some features are becoming more pronounced. Like you can see that on this person's face, there are some kind of, it's not wrinkles, right? It looks like some kind of, there are some of these tribes who burn their face to make some of these marks. It looks like some kind of marks which look very unnatural. But for whatever reason, the generative AI model that is capable of making these images, it's making these artifacts more pronounced in the future generations. So while this initial version of the generated images look very real, the later versions, it look like, oh, something is wrong in these images. So this can happen if the original training data for these AI models have a lot of fake synthetic data. And that is the case, right? In reality, if you look at this figure, in reality, there are so many high fidelity synthetic images. There are so many websites where you can go and you can check these fake images created by AI. Many of them look super realistic. Many of them do not look realistic. So you might be wondering, what if all the synthetic data is actually looking very much like real images? Is there a problem? I'll show you why there is a problem even in that case. So let's get back to the board. So this is one very small example where synthetic data can amplify some of these issues that or some of these artifacts which can cause issues in the output that is generated by the AI model. This is another example where they used some model called OPT125M. And here you can see that this is the original input. Some started before 1360, was typically accomplished by a master mason and a small team of itinerant masons. So it's like a small 3-sentence paragraph. And you can see the quality of the output that is generated based on this input over different generations. So Gen 1, Gen Z, Gen 2, etc. And you can see that the quality is degrading significantly as you move down here. So just have a look at these generations. Generation 0 is this one slightly worse. 3, 5, just go to generation 9. It's not even making any sense now. There are some special characters coming, and overall the quality of the output has significantly degraded. And this phenomenon is, in scientific terms, it's mentioned as AI model collapse. So in the Nature paper, they discuss certain idea based on perplexity score. So I'll come to that idea in a moment, what exactly is the meaning of perplexity score. But before that, I just want to show you a few terminologies that I have come across in this context. So these are some very interesting terminologies that different papers and different articles have mentioned in this context. One is, of course, the MAD, model autophagy disorder. So that is mentioned in this paper, how self-consuming generative models go mad. So this MAD, in the context, they are mentioning it as model autophagy disorder. Also, autophagy is a phenomenon where if you are going extended periods of fasting, your body will start to consume its own, proteins and its own dead cells, its own tissues that are not so good, not so useful. So it's typically attributed in extended periods of fasting. Let's say you don't eat food for 18 hours or something like that. It's said that autophagy can start. Similarly, here, what it's doing is AI is consuming itself, meaning AI is consuming its own product. So that's why this terminology. One more reason why that paper interestingly uses this MAD terminologies in the context of something called mad cow disease. So mad cow disease is a particular disease affecting cows where its central nervous system degenerates. So it cannot function like normal anymore. Maybe you are aware of this disease, and you can read this MAD term in that context also. Another interesting terminology that I have come across in the same context is called degenerative AI instead of generative AI. So the AI model collapse will make it poor in terms of its generation capability. So it's like a degenerative AI. Another extreme terminology that I've come across is digital incest. It's so fascinating the way people come across the people kind of proposed these terminologies. And last one is AI cannibalism. So cannibalism is something where one species is eating its own species. So here the generative AI model is consuming its own output, like its own product, for training itself. So that's why AI cannibalism terminology is used in this context. All of these are interesting terms. I just wanted you to be aware of these terminologies, although I really believe that some of these are very extreme, but it's nevertheless very interesting. So I just want to briefly touch upon this idea of perplexity score. So this is mentioned in the Nature paper. So I'll just show you what the paper is trying to show in terms of the perplexity score. So just let's have a look at the first figure. I'll open this in the article. So this is the first figure. So in the first figure, this sub-figure A you have already seen. I just want to open the PDF version of this paper separately. So this is the PDF version of the paper. It's open access. I'll share the link in the description. So just feel free to have a look at it. But basically here they are plotting two plots. Perplexity plot against different generation, and also the probability distribution of the perplexity of the generated data points. So what is perplexity? You might have heard of the perplexity company that can give you references for whatever information it's providing, right? So perplexity, you can imagine it is like a score. It's a number. The higher the number, the worse the model. So the higher the perplexity score, you can say like the model is not so sure what to pick. If the perplexity score is, for example, 30, it simply means that the model cannot, model has 30 different options to choose from if it is trying to predict the next word. So if an incomplete sentence is given and model is asked to predict the next word, it has 30 different options to choose from with kind of equal likelihood. That's not a very good model because it may produce things that are not very meaningful. So here in this figure, this is the figure 1b from the paper. What is being plotted is the perplexities, the probability distribution, and on the x-axis you can see the perplexity of the generated data points. So I just want you to focus on two things here. One is the mean value of these histogram like plots. So here for this red plot the mean value is this, for the blue plot the mean value is this, for this orange kind of plot the mean value is this, right? So the blue plot is generation 0, so look at the mean value. Perplexity is high, right? So I think the perplexity here is what? This is 10 raised to 0 is 1, this is 2, this is kind of 3, or rather, yeah, somewhere between 3 and 4. That is the perplexity score for generation 0. For generation 1, the perplexity score is less than that because the mean of this orange is somewhere here. Then in the future generations, as you go down, the perplexity score is kind of decreasing. That thing is also shown here. So here they are using Wikitext2. It's like a test data set. And you can see that the perplexity score is sort of decreasing after the first iteration. Here it's like 9th generation. And by the time it reaches the 9th generation, the perplexity score has decreased. So what this actually means is the model, you cannot strictly say that the model is becoming better, but rather the model is creating output that are more close to a mean value of a distribution. So if people are mostly smiling in a photo, this model keep on creating more and more and more people that are smiling. If you ask, hey, create an image of a person who's 50 years old sitting inside his house, maybe the model, if it is trained on its own generated images after 8th or 9th generation, most of the generated images will look like a smiling person. Whereas in reality, there are a lot of people who are actually not smiling in real life situations if that person is sitting in their house. In this particular example, there was no data preserved, meaning all the data used for the training of the future generation was created by the previous model. So model 1 was trained using the data created by model 0, right? So model 1 is the future generation. It was created by the data created by, it was trained using the data created by model 0. In this particular example, 10% of the data is preserved. So you can see that the perplexity score decrease is probably a bit less dramatic, especially if you look at the this mean value. So the mean of this blue curve is shifted this much. It looks a little bit dramatic, at least to me, the decrease in perplexity score. So here it decreased from roughly 60 to roughly what, 52, 53. Here it decreased from 40 to maybe 38, something like that. So there is a certain degree of decrease here and a certain degree of decrease here. But in general, the common consensus is that the more amount of human generated data is there in the data set, the lesser is this contamination, or lesser is the extent of the model collapse. So I'll show you that idea in a moment. So this figure is basically showing that idea. So let's say you are accumulating data. In this first example, we are not accumulating data. So here initial data set is this is the real data set in yellow color, data 1. Data 1 is used to create model 1. Model 1 will generate some data, data 2. And so this is completely synthetic, and that is used for building model 2, or rather training model 2. And then the model 2 generates data set 3, etc. So here, in general, as you go along model 1, model 2, model 3, etc., the test loss will increase because the data is completely synthetic as you go along the generation. So the training of the model will become worse and worse and worse. One way in which you can significantly mitigate this degeneration of AI model is by retaining real data in the subsequent training data sets. But the issue here in real life is that although there will be a huge corpus of human generated data in all the data sets, like as you see here, as people start using, or people continue to use ChatGPT and other AI models more and more, the original data set will get contaminated with more and more of this model generated synthetic data. So this is the issue. So the fraction of data that is human generated versus AI generated that is available on entirety of internet will tilt more and more favorable towards AI. So as a result, maybe the models might still again continue to become bad, but incorporating fresh human generated data is one way in which you can mitigate the rate of degradation of these generative AI models. This is a very simple example using which I just want to show you how if you keep using the synthetic data, how the models will tend to predict same, meaning very similar looking output. So let's say we have a image generation AI model in which we are training this model using photos that we have captured of real people from the internet. So since photos are most likely that of people smiling, so most of the people, so okay, let me change my color. So most of the people, although in real life they may look like this, very serious, in photos they may look like this, they are smiling. Then there is the other extreme, people like really like extreme laughter. So maybe in real life you look more like this. You neither look like this that much. Maybe you are smiling a little bit. Maybe laughter is there once in a while, but this is more real life representation of people. But maybe because photos are more taken in happy situations, maybe this is what most of the data set is. So that is what is shown in this histogram. So this is real data of humans, pictures clicked from humans. So on the left hand side of x-axis, it's like more serious. So these are photos of people that look more like this. In the middle, it's people who are smiling. So there are more number of people's photos that are smiling as shown by this histogram. And here it is like complete laughter. So the number of people who are completely laughing off is also less, right? So let's say this is the distribution of the internet data of real people's photos. Degree of smile is there on the x-axis. Now, imagine you have two types of data set like this. This is a real data set one. Maybe this is from Asia and this could be from Europe. The distribution might be very similar. Like there will be some people who are very serious, some people who are smiling, or rather large number of people who are smiling, and some number of people who are kind of laughing a lot. Maybe since human beings, the photos taken by human beings in Asia, Europe, all are kind of in similar type of situations, maybe the histogram distribution will look kind of similar. So that's why real data 1 and real data 2 look more or less similar. But now imagine I am using this data set and I'm training a generative AI model where I pick total 5 training data samples. So here there are 5 in dataset 1 and 5 in dataset 2. And I train using 5 samples and I also generate 5 sample images using generative AI. Then what will happen is, what are the top 5 samples here? So in the dataset 1, this is the top sample. This is definitely the top, most probable data point. Then this guy. So this is smiling. This is also smiling. In dataset 2, this is the top one. This is the top one, and this is third, and this is third. So now, if my sample dataset consists of only, let's say, 5 buckets, then it may consist of this guy. Sorry, it may consist of this guy. It may consist of this guy, it may consist of this, and maybe half of this and half of this, something like that. So if I were to plot that, the histogram would look like the centerpiece would be the biggest. Then here we would have something like this on this side. And maybe here also we may have something like this on this side. There will not be people who are too serious. So this tail end will be eliminated. So this guy will be kind of eliminated. This guy will be eliminated. This will be eliminated, and this also will be eliminated because we are sampling from this data set. So inherently this sampling process, what it does is it kinds of eliminates the tail of the Gaussian distribution. So the Gaussian distribution will more tend to become something like this. It tend to become more and more closer to the mean of the distribution. So now imagine, so this is how the synthetic data might look like when AI is trained on a sample of images taken, and then it has more tendency to produce images of people centered around this mean. So where mean is that of smiling. And then let's say I'm again training by sampling from this. So the top 5 samples here might be, this is 1, this is 2, 3, and maybe this is 4, and maybe this is 5. So there are 3 synthetic points and 2 real points. And then again, I train and again, I create 5 data points. So what may happen is that at the end of it, the distribution may become something like this. There won't be people who are serious and people who are kind of in extreme laughter. Most of the people's images will be highly disproportionately centered around people who are smiling. So this is also sometimes called as a unimodal distribution. So this figure is taken from the supplementary section of the Nature paper. And here it shows how the Gaussian tail gets washed away. That's the terminology that the paper uses. And here you can see that in generation 0, so generation 0 is actually this blue guy. So this is the generation 0. You can see that the Gaussian distribution is a bit more spread, meaning that the data set has a lot of diversity. But as more and more synthetic data is used for training, the Gaussian distribution of the data becomes more and more centered around this mean, and its standard deviation is decreasing. So by 9th generation, which is this topmost curve, you can see that it is more and more centered around the mean. The diversity in the data is less. And this part, let's say this part of the tail and this part of the tail is kind of getting eliminated as you go each generation ahead. So this is the terminology that is used in Gaussian tails being washed away. And what results is something called as unimodal distribution. So unimodal distribution means in the beginning, if the data set had good distribution, and if it had multiple modes, like something like this, there will be a tendency to center it slowly around the mean first, and then eventually the data will come to a single mean and a single, it will be highly centered around a single mean. So this is bimodal, but this is unimodal. So ultimately what will happen is, so this is MNIST dataset, very famous. I'm pretty sure you know about this. So in the MNIST original dataset, there are handwritten digits of 0 all the way till 9. I think there was 60,000 data points or something. And if you are using MNIST to train, let's say, variational autoencoder or something like that, to generate fake data sets of MNIST-like images, so something like this, and then you train a new model using this synthetic data to get this, and then you train another new model using this synthetic data to get this, you can see that what's happening towards 20th generation is all the generated images are looking like 0, right? Most of them are looking like 0. There is very little variance in the kind of images that are generated. On the other hand, in the original data set over here, there was significant variance in the kind of images, because there were 9 different digits and people's handwriting were different. So data had so much variance, but all of that is eliminated towards the end. So this is one way in which you can demonstrate the issue of AI model collapse, because AI is eating its own data. It's almost like cannibalism. So this MNIST dataset example is given in this paper as well. I will share the link to this paper. It's a beautiful paper. Just have a look at it. And the final question is probably, is this actually going to happen? Like 10 years down the line, 50 years down the line, will generative AI models, will they be much worse off than what it is today? You are expecting it to be better than today, right? So many people disagree with the idea, because people say that synthetic data is simply not used again and again and again in reality. In reality, the data set, there is a lot of attention paid to the kind of data set that is being used for training a model. But there is a school of thought that the origin of this Nature paper was more from the frustration that most of the content that is available on internet these days is becoming more and more like trash. If you read any news article item, this happens to me very often. So if you read any news article item, I often think, oh, is this AI generated or is this actually human generated? And once this thought occurs in my mind, I don't feel like reading that anymore, because then I feel like I am just being fooled. Like, I don't want to read AI generated content. I want to read human generated content. I want to ensure that I'm not part of a, I'm not contributing to someone's revenue by reading an article that they generated with 10 seconds worth of effort using ChatGPT. So I personally am very frustrated with a lot of trash content available on internet, and probably that is also the case with the authors of this Nature paper. I should mention the name of the authors. So these are this is the main author, Ilya Shamailov. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing their name correctly, and the rest of the authors. So feel free to check out this paper. And there are actually many other papers published on similar topic of AI model collapse. So if you are interested, and if you have any interesting thoughts or resources on this, please feel free to share it in the comments. We'll see you again in the next video. Until then, take care, and bye-bye.